I recently went to a studio and took a class called Hot Pilates, meaning Pilates in a heated room. And before that, I had taken a class at the same studio called Hot Bar class in a heated room. And what I realized after taking both of those classes is that really what this studio is doing is boot camp, and you're just offered different flavors of boot camp. So if you do your squats and your lunges at the bar, then it's a bar class. And if you start class by doing hundreds and then you do your squats and your lunges and your burpees just on the mat in the middle of the room, then it's Pilates class. But since all of them are boot camp, and it seems like increasingly studios are pushing toward things that just feel hard, things that create a lot of burn and a lot of heat, I wanted to put together a little survival guide for those times when you find yourself in a Pilates class that is actually a boot camp. Because there's some things that you want to think about and maybe modify to be sure you're protecting your joints while you build up your muscles. You'll see the thing called a mountain climber, where you're bringing knee to chest, but you're kind of running it out. So notice, just like with a regular jog or run, there's a moment when I'm switching and no feet are on the floor, and then I land on a foot with a little bit of impact. Now, if your plank is not completely perfect, where your core is engaged in a way that supports the lumbar spine from underneath and keeps a lot of space open in between the lumbar vertebrae, usually we're going to have a little bit of a hang where those lumbar vertebrae are compressing into each other, putting some squeeze on our discs, and then we add impact to that. Not a great idea. So one thing that you could do to be a little more cautious is just go knee to chest, foot down, knee to chest, foot down with a nice exhale, squeeze, inhale, stretch. And that way you can be really clear on supporting the lumbar spine. Another one that totally terrifies me is being in a plank and doing a jumping jack, where you're actually jumping open, jumping close. You can see on this one, all of the force is coming down right at my middle, which is right at my lumbar spine. So again, either hold your plank or at most tap side, center, tap side, center. Notice then you can keep your lumbar perfectly still and just move your legs. You know what else you can do? Is just not move. And I'll tell you a secret, just holding a plank without moving all around on the arms and the legs is generally going to be more challenging than doing all the moves. Because think about this. Let's say I'm doing the down, down, up, up thing. As I do that, my torso is constantly rotating and changing relative to my arms, which means the way that the shoulder is loaded is constantly changing and moving around. So some muscle fibers are getting a little bit of a respite while I put the more pressure on the other ones, versus if you just hold a plank, you are just in one position and there's one set of muscles that we're just gonna completely fatigue. You'll start shaking and then you'll know you can't hold it anymore without starting to sag somewhere, and you come down into child's pose. In a lot of these classes, there's the thing called the pulse, right? Where it's a much smaller movement and you're going up and down, up and down. Now let's think about what the goal is on those micro movements. It's sort of like underlining or putting an exclamation point at the end of that range of motion so that the muscle you're working to get there just gets extra squeeze. So for example, you might be at the bar, you might be on the mat, but to have a leg extended back behind you, and maybe the full movement is to do a tap and lift, and then the pulse would be to stay at the top and give it a tiny little micro movement into the end range. Now, a lot of times in these classes, the pulse is so fast that it's more like an oscillation, meaning it's a wiggle and there's no emphasis. So if it's a wiggle with no emphasis, again, I say, what are we trying to do? Because typically, again, it'll be something here where ostensibly we're trying to really strengthen this glute hamstring connection. So in that case, we want it to be a emphasis on the up and contract, and have time there to really like make a fist with that muscle, squeeze it as tight as you can. So if you're taking a class and there's a fast little wiggle of a pulse, slow it down, figure out what is the muscle that I'm emphasizing, and just go at a pace that lets you go squeeze and really work into it and get the most out of it. so much of the time, any movement that we're doing in a class, however challenging it is at a medium or fast pace, it's going to be way more challenging at a much slower pace. You can try pretty much any movement to see. So for example, a push-up, I could go down, up, and that's one thing. I could go down, 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 up, up, up. And you're shaking by the end of that. So really, again, in terms of muscle fatigue and therefore strengthening, there's not really any usefulness to going super fast. You could try the same thing, pardon my head disappearing here, with a squat. I could go bounce, rebound, or I could go down, down, down. Try this next time you're sitting in a chair. Take like 10 seconds to actually get your butt to the chair. Same thing when you stand up. How slowly can you ease the weight out of the chair and slowly stand up? You can make that a really good exercise just by slowing it down. Speaking of squats, when we're moving more quickly, it's so easy to lose track of our knee alignment, which is a big consideration for so many of us. If we're not thinking about it and concentrating, we bend the knee in a squat or a lunge, and the knee naturally crosses over a little bit, putting some unfortunate force into the joint versus really lining things up and preserving space in the joints. So even just the tracking of our knee alignment is a great reason to slow everything down in terms of the strength exercises up on our feet. So I guess the main thing I would want to say is I encourage you to get really comfortable modifying the movement. I'm not shy. If I'm in a class, I'm going at like 1/4 the speed of everybody else. I'm taking breaks, I'm modifying. Feel comfortable doing that. You don't need to be a hero. You can know that you're getting more out of it for your muscles and you are preserving your joints for a lifetime.